Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hi everyone and welcome to the next episode of Stressed. I am, as always, really excited to welcome the next guest to our show. Hi, Kristin. How are you today?
I'm good, Julie. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really good. I'm really excited to have you. It's Friday, and the first question that I always ask my I just wanted to say client, but you're not a client, you're a guest on the show. But I've just talked to a client, so I'm a little still in client mode. How is your day going? Where are you located? What time is it? And what have you been up to this morning?
Absolutely. So I'm in Dallas, Texas, and here it's about 1:35 or so, 1:40 probably. And actually the last couple of days, I've been talking to some professionals in the mental health space that actually have programs and are building programs around music therapy to bring into corporations. And so I have a gentleman that I've been actually working with or speaking with that's in Dubai in Germany. And so he's been kind of going over different types of cultural types of therapy around music. And then there's another individual that actually has an actual music program that he's trying to, he's actually doing it, B2C, but he actually wants to actually bring in corporations, and it's around our emotions and how we, the way we're feeling and actually collaborative team building type, exercises and questions around it. So it's been really interesting around how much music really affects our emotions.
Wow.
In a very positive way, and how it can really bring us out of our emotional state when we might be feeling sad or in certain states. So really interesting.
That is very interesting. And is it more, what kind of music is it? Is it like more binaural beats that like influence the brain frequencies, or is it just like normal music in the classical sense?
Yeah, it's basically it's really interesting. There's a couple of ways they look at it. Like part of it's team building, where a team will actually get together and or actually collaborate on a song and actually write their own song. And then there's the other part of it where you choose a song that brings a certain emotion, whether it's happiness, joy, sadness, fear, and that helps you get out of that state. So kind of helping you, like you said, kind of rewiring your brain. So when you hear certain songs, it really brings your brain and your energy vibrations to another level to help you bring you out of that state or bring you more into that state. If it's like joy or happiness or whatnot.
Yeah.
I know, like if you think about it, when you think sometimes about songs that you've had in the past, you bring up different memories. So it's kind of one of those things where there's two options. You can choose your own songs, or there's a genre where you can choose different types of songs and different types of whether it's, like you said, jazz, or whether it's hip hop, or whether it's, classical, whatnot. You can choose your own songs, or you also have an opportunity to have a facilitator help you choose them.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I definitely love music as well. And I've heard that I don't know if it had something to do with my horoscope or something, but they said that I'm actually really prone to reduce stress when I'm listening to music. It's like one of my main stress management tools, which is really true. Like I really can tell that when I'm listening to music, my mood can get really much better, or it can get like lower, like more depressed when I'm listening to kind of sad music. And sometimes I'm like, I have to remind myself, because I do enjoy like calm music, but then I'm like, it kind of affects my mood. I think I need to listen to something a little bit more uplifting.
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole premise of the music therapy that the when you bring to corporations, because the music really tunes you into what you're feeling. And sometimes people do feel sadness, and sometimes the song can help get them through those emotions. And so that's what makes it so amazing. So I've just been kind of blown away about, it's not a new concept, but in terms of bringing to corporations, that's something a little newer. A little more on the cutting edge, which I'm excited to see. Sure. Because the more we can add in the mental health space, the better.
For sure. So with that said, now that we already hear about like one of the new things that you're looking into, tell us a little bit more about you first and what you've been up to over the last couple of years and what you're doing today.
Absolutely. So I grew up here in Dallas, Texas. and went to school at UT Austin. I was a competitive tennis player for through pretty much college. And as far as my professional life, I actually was in the human resources executive professional space pretty much my whole entire career until actually co-founded Mental Wellness Unleashed, which is what I'm doing now. And these are programs and tools and techniques that we provide to corporations that actually help to develop, implement, and sustain a mentally healthy culture and workplace. So all of our programs are built on CBT techniques, which help to rewire and reorganize your pathways and synaptic connections, such as neuroplasticity. So our programs in consulting that we go in are actually benefit all employees and leaders, and the benefit individuals, and also leaders can use them as coaching tools. So we've been around, we're a young company, but these are basically programs are developed on many of the tools that I developed when I was actually in my own therapy in cognitive behavioral therapy. So, but yeah, so I brought, so I still bring my HR background from the corporate space into what I'm doing now as well.
Mm-hmm. And tell me more about that story of how that came about, that you started. Did you start that company, Mental Health Unleashed?
So yeah, it's a really interesting story. So, Julia, when I was in the corporate world, I had to kind of live, I always call it my limitation self, because I couldn't, because of the stigma around mental health, I was never able to really come out and say that I have, my diagnosis. And I noticed there wasn't a lot around mental health as an HR executive. And I actually even developed mental health, not mental health, I'm sorry, EAP programs and also benefit programs. And I looked for areas where we could really put in mental health. Like, how can we make this a more mentally healthy culture? And at one point in time, and I've been thinking about this, for several years. And finally, I just said, you know what? I can make much more of an impact if I actually do this on my own. And having lived experiences, I'm kind of like, your story that you tell. I'm like, I can do this. And so I actually met up with someone I used to work with at a large financial corporation, and she and I got together. I told her kind of what I was working on and what my vision was. And then she and I connected, and we started off as accountability partners. And then we finally decided to go ahead and just co-found Mental Wellness Unleashed.
Cool. That's so cool.
And she has an HR background as well. And so we bring, almost 40 years of human resources experience. She's got a different background in HR than I do. So bring that together as well. Mm-hmm. And so she's the executive program director. So we mesh really well.
That's really great. And so I love that you brought up CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, for those of you that don't know what CBT is. Can you tell us a couple of different tools that you use in order to help employees at work invest in their mental health?
Absolutely. So, cognitive behavioral therapy is where we truly have the ability to retrain our brain like the muscle it is. And so when I was in cognitive behavioral therapy, throughout my journey, I was diagnosed later on. I had suffered depression and major anxiety when I was younger and in high school. I had fragmentations of a trauma that I had gone through that were fragmented memories. And so, and just I have to say this, it was not my beautiful parents. But I kept trying to understand what they were. And so when I got into my 20s, all of a sudden, all these memories just came flooding back like a freight train. And so then I called this the second part of my journey. So when I was in therapy, I had frustrations because I couldn't find a therapist that I was clicking with. And then I finally found this therapist, and she was a specialist in CBT. And so I would go through these sessions, and I was like, oh my God, these are great. But then I would leave and go, how do I sustain this? And so I started building tools during, after, and to this day around CBT techniques. And one of the initial ones that I developed was a 180 shift tool. And basically what it is it's taking negative thoughts, your non-reality, and doing a 180 to shift to a positive thought pattern. And that can also include self-limiting beliefs. And so what you do, you take that thought pattern and you journal about it, say it out loud for 21 to 30 days, 3 times a day with affirmations. And you need to do it habitually. So having a journal, like in the morning with your morning rituals, is a great way to do it. Then in the afternoon, again, say it out loud. 'Cause the more senses that we use in working these tools, the better. And then at night, I always say with my clients, put it in your phone, record it, whatever it is, with music behind it, and it goes from your subconscious to your conscious. So what we're doing is, another term for it too is called ANTS, which is a term deemed by Dr. Daniel Amen, and that's automatic negative thoughts or talk. So you're taking these negative thought patterns, which a lot of us, develop when we're in childhood. To do a 180 shift to the opposite of what that negative thought pattern is. And it's amazing how it starts to become automatic with other negative thought patterns. And so for me, that was one of the initial tools I developed that was so impactful and powerful. That can work for anybody with it. Like, they don't have to have a mental health condition, just somebody that's going through tough times when it comes to having like a fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Like, we talk about Carol Dweck, we talk about, because I know you like her too. And she's fabulous. And it's just all the research she's done around growth mindset, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, those types of things. So this tool really helps with that, really helps to develop a growth mindset.
Okay, I need to dig a little bit deeper into that, because I find it very interesting, and I hope that the listeners will find this super interesting as well. So let's say you have a lot of negative thoughts, sad thoughts, depressed thoughts, you feel really anxious, you have limiting beliefs maybe that you have identified. Would you journal and talk about that, or do you do that 180 shift first and then you try to always journal about something positive these 3 times a day?
Yeah. So the journal, in fact, I have 2 journals. I have one for gratitude and one for journaling for these types of things. So yes, you literally take that limiting thought or thoughts, if you have thoughts, and you actually journal about them every day around why is this belief not true? What makes it not true? What makes it true? Why am I having these thoughts? Where did it come from? Like, journaling about it's like self-reflecting as to where, like diving into yourself to the introspection part of it is what really is amazing, because it really makes you realize, I've been saying this to myself all these years and it's not true. So what we're really trying to do is get from our non-reality to our reality. So when you're journaling about this every day and saying it out loud, saying, I have a lot of clients that say, I don't want to do this because I'm going to fail. And then you change that to I can do anything I set my mind to. And so you journal around that. You journal around that positive thought. And you say, how can I? Why can I? What can I do? And as you continue to do that, your brain starts to shift, and then it starts to become automatic to say, no, I can do whatever I set my mind to. And so all of a sudden you're like, it becomes it becomes a belief that's not only a positive belief, but it starts to help with your value and belief system. So the mindset formula that I have is our emotions and thoughts drive our actions and our behaviors, which drives our reality.
Yeah. Joe Dispenza. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm obsessed with his work. Yeah.
I love his work.
Okay, so you do both, because he basically says to do both too, right? When he's doing his meditations, he says first dive into what is not helpful and what you want to let go of, and then you kind of build that new reality of that more positive mindset. Okay, really cool tool. So you do that 3 times a day for 25 to 30 days, and that really helps to kind of reintegrate into the subconscious in order to help you reprogram your mind.
Yeah, and actually, what I'll tell you, the first couple of days, sometimes it doesn't like if you have a self-limiting belief or a negative thought pattern that you've had for a long time, the first couple of days, it just doesn't feel normal sometimes. Like, you're like, I've always felt this way. So sometimes our conscious wants to keep our subconscious from making a change. So that's why it's so important to do it habitually for 21 to 30 days.
Yeah.
And you're right to what you just said, talking around why, where it comes from, why that's a negative limiting belief is in understanding why, to help change it to the reality of what the belief is.
Yeah. And so here's the next question, because I'm talking a lot about this with my sister, who just started the Joe Dispenza meditations, breaking the habit of being yourself. And she said to me, I've been really trying to do this, but I feel like I'm almost feeling more negative at the moment. Is that normal? That maybe at the beginning when I'm starting this process, that it feels like even heavier and more difficult to go through it?
Yeah, I think yes, that happens. That happens often. That's why it's so important to continue to because I call it mental homework because it's not things that we want to change in our the what that we've been thinking for so long. And to what your sister said is exactly kind of spot on.
Mm.
You're going, I thought this so long, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, this is depressing. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to how am I gonna, I need to work to change this. And I think part of the initial thought process, especially with me, when it happened with me, I was like, I've been telling myself this for this many years, and it's just not true. And so then you have to kind of, so a bit of the sadness and depression sort of happens sometimes when you're first in the process of doing that. And so
Mhm.
when you're doing meditation, sometimes it happens too. So you're bringing up thoughts that may be sad and limiting beliefs that make you sad. So you kind of go through that phase. And so when you're changing them, there's a little bit of that. That's why the first initial couple days
Mhm.
may not feel normal and may bring on those emotions.
Mhm.
And then as you continue to realize this is my reality,
Mhm.
then all of a sudden your mindset becomes much more positive and
Yeah.
flexible about around that thought.
Okay. And another question, because I've been doing this now for 2 months and I feel like at the beginning, the impact was really positive and really powerful. And I could really see how things really shifted for me. And over the last 2 weeks, I feel like it's been getting more difficult again. Is that also something that you see? Because obviously, right, we are talking about 25 to 30 days of homework, but it's mental homework. You don't just do it for 30 days and then you forget about it again. It's kind of an ongoing process. Have you, like, what is your experience with that? I'm kind of curious.
So I think a lot. So what I'll say about that is when we talk about a growth mindset and emotional intelligence, oftentimes we'll be in a situation where because you obviously have a growth mindset and obviously high emotional intelligence, we
Mm.
can fall back in those patterns. But when we have a growth mindset, to your point, what you just said, you're aware of it. So
Mhm.
you're aware of that you're feeling you're having these feelings and you're feeling it difficult. I absolutely understand what you're saying because I've gone through that many times. And
Mhm.
then what I do with myself is say, why am I feeling either sad, depressed, or why am I having these feelings? And why is it because why am I feel like I'm going backwards?
Mhm.
And sometimes it's not about going backwards. It's just you're in a mindset where you're either probably looking at another negative thought, or maybe it's something that happened to you that's making you sad, or maybe you're just having sad days where your mindset is not where it normally is. And I
Mhm.
think that happens a lot too, especially with people. I was diagnosed with PTSD, clinical depression, and clinical anxiety, and I have to manage mine on a basic daily basis.
Mhm.
So when I hear you say that, I know exactly what you're talking about. But
Mhm.
the beautiful thing is that when you're in that place with the growth mindset, you can say, I accept these feelings, because the first thing you have to do is accept the feelings
Mhm.
and accept the emotions. This is what a lot of this music therapy talks about: accepting our sadness, accepting our fears, accepting, a lot of people try to push them away. And that's when it becomes difficult. And that's when it becomes debilitating, is when you keep, it becomes like a looping thought,
Mhm.
whether it's fear or sadness or whatever that is. And, a lot of times people will start to fall back in that. When you realize I'm looping, then you come back out of that and say, okay, accept my emotions I'm feeling. And now you can start to move on to those more positive thoughts of
Mhm.
healing
Mhm.
those feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a really important lesson, hopefully for the listeners, because I think really one of my experiences over the last few years, since I've also was diagnosed in 2018 with anxiety and depression, is that it's an ongoing process. And I actually just recorded a video for my YouTube channel on how to cope with anxiety, because I don't think you can really overcome or cure anxiety. I think you can have better moments and like harder moments with anxiety, and you will go naturally as an anxious person through cycles where you feel less anxious and through cycles where you feel more anxious. But yeah, I think the most important takeaway hopefully here is that it's a constant work. It's just like how you are constantly investing in your physical health, right? Because you are going exercising 3 or 4 times a week and you try to eat healthy, right? It's just the same with our mental health as well, especially if you are prone to, right, anxiety or depression or negative thought cycles. So yeah, I think to not give up and to always invest again. Like even I think Joe Dispenza says this as well, that if you have a bad day, right, our ego and our conscious mind is like, oh, I'm having a bad day today anyway, so I'm not going to do the work. That those are the days that are the most important to actually sit down and journal and talk with someone and like work through these emotions.
100%, Joe. This is such a good point. And what I want to add to what you just said, which is so important, there is a true mind to body. And there's something called the vagus nerve that literally, like when you're mentally not doing well, you're physiologically not going to be doing well. So when we have clinical anxiety or anxiety, and we're having bouts of anxiety, we start to have physiological issues, digestive problems, aches and pains. So for people that are having, maybe listening and thinking that's normal, that's not normal. And I thought that was normal for the longest time. So it's really important that when we feel like we're falling back into that state, to your point, that those are the days when we need to get up. Take our shower, have a structure. One of the things I'll tell you that really works well, it's worked well for me, is if I have a day like that, I have a structure. I have something in place where actually step by step that I do, that makes me that I do, including journaling, and that's part of my morning rituals.
Same.
So if I'm having a day like that, I actually say, oh my God, I mean, because there's a couple times where I'll skip my morning rituals, right? But if I'm having a day like that, the most important thing I do is my morning rituals.
Yeah, I'm the same way, for sure. Structure is so important, and because I feel like you almost, even once you do that, I already feel accomplished, that I feel like I've done these things, right? Because sometimes it's hard to get out of bed, and then you're like, oh, do I really want to get out of bed today, right? And then you do it and you just follow, because it's become so automatic, your ritual and your routine in the morning, that structure, that after you've accomplished it, you will already feel more like yourself again, I guess, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's really important too. And, especially whether in corporate or entrepreneurship or whatnot, we've talked about burnout before. And, when we've, and you and I have both been through it. And, when we talk about burnout, which is a big topic right now, we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. Self-care is self-preservation. And I think people need to, sometimes people think, oh, I got to take care of all this other people. If we're not taking care of ourselves to what we're talking about today, then we can head into that direction. And then, when we talk about burnout, there's onside of it stress, and then it can lead to, a stress where you're kind of being productive, and then chronic stress, which is where you're like, I'm having a hard time managing this. And then burnout, which is where you just can't manage it at all. So when we're feeling this way, we need to make sure that we are doing what we're discussing today and taking care of ourselves. And that self-care is important. So that structure around self-care is really important.
It's really important. Yeah. And one thing that really resonates with me that I also want to highlight is that I think even when you're on burnout and you're not like on the super, super severe burnout stage yet, you might still be really productive, and you might still be like, like everything is still fine, right? I am not maybe feeling 100%, but I'm still getting my work done. So everything is okay, right? I think that not being productive piece and the performance piece, that's really suffering. I think that might just really come at the end, because I feel like peak performers have learned to push that and to ignore the signals of their body and mind for a super, super long time, which is then, right, that's why I think that's when people get anxiety attacks or panic attacks, because they just ignore it for so long that the body's like, hey, something is not going right, like you need to pay attention to me. So I think, even if you are feeling productive right now, it's still like, it still can be that you are already in the burnout stage, and that you're feeling super anxious, and that the anxiety that you're experiencing actually helps you to keep those stress hormones high, to keep you be productive during your workday, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, that's actually what happened to me. And what happens is because of the anxiety, your cortisol your cortisol, the stress hormone, goes up. And so people, that are listening today, I mean, when your cortisol goes up, you go in fear, flight, fright mode, and then inflammation happens, and then your thought, your even though you're being productive, your decision making starts to falter, and things start to happen. And what happened to me is I did that exact thing. And then I went to the office one day, and I could barely read what was on my computer. So I had pushed myself to the point where, I'm like, okay. And the other thing I'll tell you too is, which I know, most likely, is that, the difference between anxiety and panic attacks are like, anxiety, you feel it coming on. And so you're like, okay, I'm feeling the anxiety. What I have coping mechanisms. A lot of my coping mechanisms, people don't even know what they are. Like they wouldn't even know I'm doing them. But panic attacks come on. So sometimes someone's having a panic attack, then you know you're really in that chronic phase of stress.
Yeah. And it's really scary. Like I have unfortunately not had any panic attacks in my life, but I have friends that have gone through it because I think they've ignored their signals. And they were super shocked, right? And they were traveling and all of a sudden they thought they're having a heart attack, right? And went to the ER and the hospital and, you know, they told them everything is fine and they just experienced a panic attack and they were like, wow, like this is really scary, right? And don't let it come to that. Don't wait until it goes to that point where you're, yeah.
Well, and I think, and I'm glad you brought that up because I had panic attack. The first one I had, I thought I was having a heart attack too. And the story is, I actually was in a movie theater with a friend of mine, and I was coming in and coming going. All of a sudden, everything was getting like spinning. I was getting dizzy. So people, and all of a sudden, like my I had palpitations. I actually went to my car, and when you have a panic attack, you don't know what it is because now that I know, I mean, I've had this is years ago. A gentleman actually came over and said, "Ma'am, can I call somebody for you?" I'm like, you know, my parents at the time or whatever. And they weren't available. So he called 911 because he thought I was having a heart attack. So I ended up in the hospital. And when they hooked me up the EKG, it actually has similar effects of heart attack, but they said, you're having a panic attack. And the one thing I was thinking about that is, you know, I was so relieved because at least I knew what it was. So when it was coming on, I could do exercises to keep, because since then, I mean, I have to manage that too. So then once you have it, then you have coping mechanism, things you can do to
relax yourself. Yeah.
Like breathing exercises.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Okay. So we talked about the first CBT technique, but I'd love if you could share more with us. What else can people do?
So there's another really wonderful tool around resilience. And, you know, people oftentimes don't realize that resilience is a skill that can be taught and developed. It's a skill. We're not born with it. Some people are born more resilient than others, but it's a skill that can be developed. So there's a resilience tool I developed, and it's around areas of where you can improve on resilience. And when I talk about resilience, it's actually based on positive psychology, and there's 7 areas of resilience that we concentrate on, like optimism, self-image, faith and understanding your purpose, problem solving. So this tool basically takes all those areas, and then I built drivers around what you can do to increase and improve those areas when it comes to resilience. And resilience is not just about getting through challenging and adverse situations. It's about how fast you adapt and how effectively you adapt and being stronger for it. So, you know, I say the nucleus is resilience is a nucleus of all mindset traits. Because for me, if I didn't have the resilience, I wouldn't have been able to get through the other mindset areas around resilience. I mean, I had to be resilient to be able to get through all the other areas I was going through with depression and anxiety and other things. So my resilience is really built up. So these drivers, the beautiful thing about this tool is that you can take maybe 2 of the 7 and take drivers to work on them. And then you're doing really great. All of a sudden you're having some issues maybe around problem solving. So then you take drivers around that. So for an example would be, you know, practicing gratitude, living in the present. You know, that's one of the 7 principles is around, you know, being optimistic. So how do you do that? What do you do what do you do to have gratitude? What do you do to live in the present? You know, those types of things. So it's a really good tool that you can go back and not only use for yourself, but use for a coaching tool and also use for like your family members. And then you can always go back to that tool for this other places you might be having some issues with. So that's a beautiful part of it. All the drivers, you can relate to the different 7 aspects of resilience.
Very interesting that you said that connection between resilience and mindset. I feel like mindset plays a role everywhere. Like it's almost like, yes, I agree with you. Resilience is super important. But then at the same time, I feel like if you don't have the mindset that you can learn these tools, right? Because you have the growth mindset to be like, okay, I can actually do this and I can change my mind and I can progress, right? Then you wouldn't maybe even invest in those different tools.
Yeah, well, for me, when I was going through it, I was realizing I have to find a way to be resilient, to be able to deal with all the self-reflection, all these patterns, the trauma. I felt like if I don't have the resilience to be able to do these exercises and tools, I won't be able to do them. Like I have to be resilient. I have to say, okay, how can I be resilient to continue to build a growth mindset? How can I be resilient to get out of my comfort zone, which is part of growth mindset? To look at a challenge as an opportunity, like not look at it as, oh my gosh, this is a setback. Look at falling, or I call it falling, but failure or falling, as a growth mindset trait, right? Because growth mindset looks at falling and failing as an opportunity for success. As a fixed mind, growth would look at that and just say, I just failed. So for me, that resiliency really helped with my growth mindset to be able to on a daily basis say, okay, I've got to overcome this hurdle. How do I do that? I do that through my resilience.
Okay, so resilience is one tool. I'm really curious because you talked about cognitive behavioral therapy and how going, I guess, maybe to more traditional therapists wasn't as helpful for you as going to a CBT therapist. I'd love to hear some more tools that you learned that you found really helpful in coping with mental health.
Yeah. So, when I was going to the regular therapist, I kind of just talk about, you just talk about like, what happened and, just kind of talk through like, oh, well, these are some things you could, when I was in CBT, the hour was so intensive because it would be like taking that thought, these patterns. So for instance, an example would be a lot of people that suffer from trauma, they feel guilty and ashamed. And so when you're in CBT, therapy, they're taking those thoughts and we ask questions around, why do you feel that way? Why do you think it's your fault? What can you do to change that? And so it's not just talking through what happened, it's actually giving you tools and techniques around resilience and mindset to say, this is what you need to change this behavior thinking, getting down to the center and the nucleus of why you're feeling this way. And so when I was in these sessions, that's why I started to build these tools afterwards, because we'd have these CBT sessions where we would talk about different ways of thinking and changing that behavior. But then when I left my CBT therapy session, I'm like, how am I going to sustain this? So she gave me sort of the foundational, this is what you need to do. You need to take this thought and turn it into this thought, which is the reality. She didn't use the word reality at the time, but I changed it. I used the word reality. And so that's what really helped me build these tools, is because I was going off of foundational CBT specialists about how do we change these types of negative thought patterns and self-limiting beliefs, which, we all have them to a certain degree, but some of them can be so debilitating to where it's hard for you to function. So those different techniques that we talked through about changing negative thought patterns to positive and flexible thought patterns was what really was the technique around all the other mindset areas in my therapy that I needed to change.
And how are you doing today? So, you have all these tools now and hopefully rewired your brain in certain areas, right? Like how do you feel like you're coping today with anxiety and depression?
It's been amazing. I always tell people, like, I use my own tools. So, so I'm doing really well, because what's happened in my world now is I'm sustaining everything. So when something goes down, when something's coming up, when I'm managing anxiety, because of these tools and because of the coping mechanisms that I've developed, there's consequences versus action tools. There are a lot of other tools we can talk about all day long. I'm able to take those tools, and they're automatic for me. So when something's coming up, like an issue or a life event or something that's challenging, I'm ready, because my brain has been rewired. There's something called, I don't know if you've heard of it, sprouting and rerouting. Sprouting is actually building new neurons, and then rewiring is actually having synaptic connections like go around and find a new way of connecting. And depression calls that. So it's rerouting. So my neuroplasticity of my brain has really changed because of these tools, and because of how much I just do them. I just do it automatic. I do it daily. That's kind of my morning rituals and all the things that I do integrate CBT to some degree. Tools.
So the thoughts still come up, but then you have tools. Well, the thoughts still come up because I think also because you're just challenged on a daily basis, right? With life and with just things that are thrown at you. Do you feel like from a limiting belief perspective that do you feel like your limiting beliefs are still coming up in these situations, or do you feel like that has already been more shifted into a more positive way too?
It's really interesting. I had 3 phases of my journey, starting when I was little to several years back ago. And when I was going through my journey, before I had the CBT therapy, I would have physiological issues going on. I would have, things coming up all the time in my mind. I'd be at work, and all of a sudden things would just, they would just come into my mind.
Mhm.
That's all. That has gone away. That's really gone away. It's very, that's very manageable. I don't even have. From where I was to where I am, I'm a different person. And I'm my true self. So, I think for me, that's kind of where we were talking about earlier about when you kind of go back into you're having a difficulty or a challenging situation or depression, able to come out of that, unlike I would have been on this maybe the first and second phase of my journey. It would be debilitating where I wouldn't be able to do it. So now, I'm able to completely function no matter what hits me and comes my way.
Mhm. Mhm. And so tell us a little bit more about your work that you do with organizations. I'm really curious about that as well. So yeah, how do you work with organizations?
Right. So we go in, and I've built a framework, a tiering process around going into an organization and looking at their culture. And we meet with stakeholders, we have stakeholder meetings, and then we do focus groups and do, interviewings and surveys and kind of find out where they are from a mental health perspective, and employee wellness as well, because we're holistic in what we do. So it's not just mental, it's holistically things that we can implement, see what they already have in place, see what, and see what needs to be implemented, help develop and customize that culture and that framework to the actual organization. And then as soon as we implement all that, and it's looking at EAP systems, what other education, roundtables, lunch, different things that you can do to implement and customize that program and initiative for that organization. And then we come back in and we say, okay, where are we, a year later, 6 months later, and then we look at tweaking and sustaining it. How do we need to continue to sustain it and improve it? And then we have trainings around the workshops, team buildings, lunch and learns, and different areas. We have a lunch and learn series around, resilience, mindfulness, the topics that you can customize topics as well, around mental health and wellness, what you can do around stress and anxiety, coping mechanisms, what are stressors and triggers. So we build programs and initiatives around that for organizations. And also around, one of the areas that we're focusing on now is burnout. And a lot of the healthcare organizations are going through that. They're very much so. So much as other corporations, but so just going in there and really seeing how can we only build this but sustain it. That's kind of what differentiates us. We don't like to do one and dones. We like to do more of a series or something that's going to sustain a mentally healthy culture and employee wellness.
Yeah, totally resonates with me as well. And how do you feel like, I don't know, how many years has it been since you started this company?
We're about 3.5 years old.
3.5 years.
3.5 years new.
And when no, that's great. That's really great. And do you feel like when you started this work that companies were open to that kind of work? Like, do you feel like you really had to like advertise and market and convince leaders to invest in that? Like, how has that shift been even in the last 3.5 years? Because I'm sure that with COVID, I can see it in my work obviously as well, that corporations are a little bit more open now to talk about mental health and helping employees. But like, what was the journey for you like?
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is also speaking their language. So like for instance, an example, if you're we had a cybersecurity company and it was, male dominated. And so, well, we went in with, resilience instead of, mental health, like how can we build up resilience? And so that, so it really is about what is the organization, what are their needs, what is their language? How do you want to adapt it in there? But, I think to your point, when we first started, we did a lot of research, and there's a lot of companies out there that actually do programs and initiatives that are based on cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. There's not a lot of that out there, so it's new. So, when we were out there advertising what we do, one of the things that's really great about what we do is that it's these programs and these tools and techniques they work for people with mental health conditions and people that don't have mental health conditions. So that's one of the selling points. And that leaders can not only utilize for themselves, but for their teams and for coaching. And so that's been, so it's actually, changing the narrative. Like I never use the word mental illness, I always use mental health conditions because, you don't say I have a heart illness, you say I have a heart condition, right? So helping to change the narrative to normalize and sensitize and destigmatize mental health has been something where that's been really helpful in how we market out what we do.
Yeah. One of my podcast guests, like a year or so ago, said a really powerful quote that so resonated with me. I'm sure it resonates with you too, which is not everyone has a mental illness, but everyone has mental health.
Absolutely.
Right? So and I think if you don't invest in your mental health, you can become you can have struggles and things. So that really resonated with me.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we do say. We say, when we give presentations and we do webinars, we always say we all have mental health. Mm-hmm. So, everyone's going to go through something at some point in their life, even if they don't have a mental health condition. So, that's something, and that's important. We had a large company where, we had one individual, and we do pre-surveys before we go in and to ask, what's the culture like. And one individual said they had never had anxiety and they didn't know how to deal with what was going on within the company. And it was a very large company. And they said they didn't know what to do. And so they never even had anxiety. So they didn't even know what it was and how to deal with it. So there are people out there that have not had the adversity that some others have. And so they deal with things so differently. Mm-hmm. And when somebody comes and they don't have the coping mechanisms, they're like, I don't know what to do. So that's why it's so important that we all talk about having
to equip them. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. Great. I'm trying to think what else. So you already talked about your morning routine. I'd love to hear maybe one or two more things that you do when you feel like you're faced with a challenging situation in your day-to-day, or you even talked about like panic attacks and now have tools that you can like immediately use when you feel like something is coming up. What's maybe two things that changed your life, or maybe even something that you feel like is new? Like, I feel like a lot of things that we're talking about might be things that people have heard about before, but is there anything where you're like, oh, this really helped for me and I like didn't expect this to help?
Yeah, I really think that having a structured day when you're in that, when you're in a downward place, or if you feel like you're just, you wake up and you're like, I don't even know, like, I don't know how I'm going to get through the day, or I'm not feeling motivated. Having that structure to say, I'm going to get up and I'm doing these morning routines. I'm going to get up and do them even more. Like, for instance, if I'm walking, I need to walk a little more, or I need to be with nature a little more. Or I need to get up and literally just walk outside. And I think, I have other tools like, that help with getting through the day. So, but I will say, I think it's really having something structured in place. And, not just saying, feel gratitude for today, but like have a structured way of planning how you're going to get through stress and anxiety, and what coping mechanisms are you use if you have a trigger. And having those in place and ready to go, and just being very aware when things are coming on, to be able to address that before it gets to a place where you feel like you can't function or you can't produce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually just thought of a guest that I had on my weekly group coaching call, the Academy of Peak Performers. His name is Eric Severson, I think is his last name. He was also on the podcast before, and he talked about something that really resonated with me, that has really resonated with me in the last week. And I'm like, okay, I really want to integrate that. So I want to share it. There's obviously always this like reaction versus response mode. So when we are in a stressful situation, we quickly like react instead of taking a moment to reflect on, okay, what's happening, what I'm experiencing, what's coming up for me, and then responding instead of reacting to it. And he said the question that he always asks himself in that moment of reflection is, how would my best self, the best version of me, react to this situation? Like, what would I do? What would I say? How would I react? And I thought it was so powerful, even though it's such a simple like phrase, right? But oftentimes, obviously, when we're operating from our best self and from our best side, then obviously we are, kinder, more compassionate, and more reflective. And so I thought that really stuck with me. I'm like, that's a really good sentence to ask yourself in stressful situations.
Well, and I think to that point too, I'll bring this up. It's not what happens to us, it's the way we react and respond. Yeah. And I think, to what you said earlier, empathetic and compassionate thinking is so important. So when we're looking at emotional intelligence, when we're looking at regulating our emotions, he's spot on, because what you have to do is take a step back and say, okay, I'm emotionally feeling this way. And this, I mean, being in HR with employee relations issues, 50% or more were due to people not having the ability to self-regulate their emotions. So if we take a step back and we say, I'm feeling this emotion, but my response needs to be, I need to logically think about this. And I call it functional conflict. So when you're looking at a conflict as a functioning way of getting a solution, that helps you self-regulate your emotions. So, I mean, I'll add that too. I mean, there's several other things I could say, but self-regulation of emotions is huge when it comes to impulse control. So what he said is exactly right. It's how would my best self, if I was in a situation, I'm getting this response from this person or something's happening to me I can't control, what would my best self, the version of myself react?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. It's not the what happens, is how we respond.
Yeah, for sure. What are the books that shaped you the most in this journey?
Of course, mindset, psychology success. Change your brain, change your life. That's an awesome, it's Dr. Daniel Amen, I mentioned it before. Great book. Another one I would mention is The Code of the Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakhiani. It's a great book. Those three are great. Atomic Habits, another fabulous book to get. So those four right there, I mean, I'd say are great. One Decision, and that's by he's actually a life coach for the entertainment business. He's on Dr. Phil show all the time. It's like making one large decision in your life and changing it, and how that can affect your life in an amazing way, positively. So those are some really good books, just off the top of my head that I can think of.
Great. Well, Kristin, this was really, really wonderful. I really appreciate having you here and having this conversation with you. If people want to learn more about you, how could they best reach out?
Sure. And go to our website, www.mentalwellnessunleashed.com, or reach out to me directly, which is Kristin Durney at mentalwellnessunleashed.com. Also, we've got a Facebook business page, a LinkedIn page. It has some free resources that people can go to, utilize. We post on there all the time. And then we have an Instagram page as well. So, I always like to give out that, because we do have a lot of free resources for people that they can go to and utilize and actually take immediate action if they're in a situation. So we try to make sure we put content and resources and tools out there that people can utilize.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. Well, I am really, really excited that our paths have crossed. We recently spoke at a panel discussion together, and it's really wonderful to see so many people invest in this space and to connect with the people like you, to just learn from each other and share what's working and what's not working. So thank you so much for your openness and for your vulnerability, also to share your own story. And I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you for having me, Julia. This is wonderful. It was really great to meet you, and that our paths crossed too as well.
Thank you.